Hey, this is Jim here. I just wanted to take a minute and talk about these Mantua slash Tyco style steam locomotives. The ones that I own are the Pacific, like this one here. I've got one of these, and as you can see, I'm making some modifications. It's got a pilot from a Bachmann Mikado, and I reworked the front part of the walkway, and it's got a aftermarket feed water heater, and there'll be more details added to that. And it's got a cab from a different Mantua locomotive, an 080 or 280, something like that. And it's just a little different in detail from the standard, and that's why I used it. And you can see there's some changes to the tender. I've got the power coming from the tender through one wire to the cab rather than bolting it down here, because sometimes the wire and the drawbar will interfere with each other, causing the tender to derail. I've also got a wire because I have put a working light into the tender as well. Another thing I did to hopefully cut down on these things derailing through switches, as they sometimes do, is I filed off the flange from the inner wheels. It should help these things get through switches with a little less trouble. I've only test run this a couple of times, and it seemed to work, but, you know, they don't derail all the time, but it's a peeve that just gets to me, so I did something about it. Now, there's videos on YouTube already. The one I watched was on classic model trains, on the basic maintenance on these, but there's some things that aren't covered under the basic maintenance. But there are a lot of these things on eBay that have lived long and interesting lives, and they've got issues. And you may get one that doesn't run well, and you do all the basic maintenance, and it still doesn't run well. And you may think the motor's bad, but it may be a chassis problem. What I found playing around with these, and it goes for the Pacific and the Mikado and any of the others derived from these. First of all, inspect the insulating tape on the left side wheels. You can see a bit of white paint there. If there are gaps in that insulating tape, I just take a fine paintbrush and some acrylic hobby paint, and I pump it in there, and I fill up those gaps to make sure there's no arcing going on anywhere with the drivers. Also, all of the insulated wheels, you got to inspect those for cracks. If you get cracks in these wheels, whether it's on the locomotive's front truck, rear truck, or on the tenders, if you have cracks, you can get arcing from the axle to the rail or rail to the axle. I had that problem on this, and it'll melt the wheel. I don't know if you can actually see that, but I take care of the cracks with just CA and a toothpick. Flow it into the crack, fill the crack, stops the arcing. And if you have that problem, it'll make a tremendous difference in the way your locomotive runs. And again, you got to check all of the plastic wheels on these things, because they have metal axles. So if there's any kind of cracking, you can get momentary shorts as the thing runs down the track, and it just runs awful. Again, the tender has the same issue. You got to inspect these wheels for cracks, and if you find them, just fill them in with CA. That's all it takes. And another problem I discovered on a lot of the mass-produced Tycos, which this I don't believe is. I think somebody may have built this from a kit. But on the mass-produced ones, the axle pockets are often painted. And it kills the performance of these things. And what you need to do, and you can see it's been done on this, is you got to grind these peened over pins off. And get the axle retainer off. Get the axles out, and just take a small round needle file and lightly scrape the paint off of there and clean up the ends of the axles, because they've been rolling in paint and they'll be all blackened, and you'll notice just a tiny dot of silver showing, and there's very little conductivity there. Clean them up, and I used a little dielectric grease that I bought in an auto parts store and put that in the pockets. and they run so much better. I mean, the strongest puller I have is now an old stock Mikado that was awful when I first got it. That one didn't have cracks in the wheels, but it did have a bad motor. I replaced the motor, and I did the axle thing on it. And I do believe I filled some gaps in the insulating tape on that. And the insulating tape will be on the left-hand side of the locomotive, because the locomotive picks up energy from the right rail and the tender from the left through these brass wheels. So you got to have good conductivity, axle to the truck to the chassis, and if you're still connecting your wire here, you need to make sure that area is clean too. But if you've done all of those, if you do all these things, something that other people gave up on could end up running pretty well for you, because I've gotten some surprising results when you really go through these things and nip all those little problems. Anyway, I think that's all I've got for today. Have a good one.